This didn't happen too long ago, so everything is still fresh in my mind. My fiance and I were enjoying a nice relaxing evening at home. The cable had randomly gone out, so it was quiet while we tried to fix it. Our living room has 2 large windows looking out at the street and driveway, and our door also has a large oval window in it. We live on a dead-end street with few neighbors. While fixing the cable, a truck screeches into our driveway, and 2 men immediately get out screaming, "Hey, it's us!" I initially groaned, thinking it was my fiance's annoying cousin and friends randomly showing up. That's until my fiance bolts into the back bedroom. The men have then gotten onto the porch, and the one is staring at me from the large window and banging on it, and the other is pulling at the door and looking in. They're screaming at us, "Let us in!" And it's not friendly. I'm sure they don't know us. Our house couldn't be confused for any other on the road either. My fiance is back near the door. He tells them to leave. I see he went to retrieve the pistol. I kind of inch off the couch and go around behind to somewhat hide. I yell I'm calling the cops. They back off a little toward the driveway, but as soon as I move in front of the door, they're back screaming to be let in. Trying for the doors and windows, they keep shouting their names for some odd reason, but we don't know them and have never seen them. I'm calling 911 in the back, but keeping an eye on them from another window. I finish up calling and move slightly into the hallway. They're backing off again, but not before telling us in a creepy and incredibly threatening tone to have a Merry Christmas. They pull out incredibly fast and are off. No attempt to stop anywhere else. We don't receive any follow-up information from the police report. But one thing I can say, it was the worst Christmas Eve I've ever had. On Christmas Day in the evening, I was visiting an old friend. My bloke had bought a new game on the Steam sale, so was engrossed in that, and I got bored. It was getting late in the evening, and my bloke called and told me an old bandmate and his wife were visiting and going to be playing the guitar together. I headed home, but I was really tired, so when I got in, I half-jokingly told them I was going to sleep, so if you get too noisy, I'm going to tell you to get the fuck out. A joke with my friend, as the last time he had an old bandmate around, they had been too loud and kept me up all night. I thought I'd be polite and say hi to the couple before heading home. They were the old rocker types, covered in tattoos, dressed in black, wearing sunglasses indoors kind of type. We chatted for a while and they seemed really nice and, well, normal. The woman had a couple of grown-up children and the man seemed quite friendly and even spoke some English with me. I live in Finland, but English is my native language. After a while, I said goodnight and went to bed. At 5:30 in the morning, I was awoken by shouting. I went into the lounge to see what was going on and saw my bloke holding a knife to this couple, and they were all shouting at each other. I calmed things down, basically told them all to calm the fuck down, and took the knife away. I should mention that my bloke had anger issues when he drinks strong drinks, and he had been drinking cognac all evening. He's trying to stay sober now after the experience of that evening. They carried on arguing, but as it was in Finnish and drunken talk, I couldn't quite understand everything, but the gist of it was the woman reminding the man that my bloke is the son of their friend, and then the woman said to my bloke very clearly, and I definitely understood this right, "How would you feel if I held a knife to your woman?" At the time, not knowing who they were, she just sounded to me kind of motherly, trying to make him understand how his actions make other people feel, but in retrospect, that was incredibly chilling. The whole fight ended after about 20 minutes in forgiveness and hugs, as drunk scraps often do, and the couple left. Later on, me and my bloke went to bed and he apologized for losing his temper and acting very stupidly, but then mentioned that the couple are actually murderers, as in they killed a couple of people, and then went off to sleep to leave me freaking out that I had told murderers to chill the fuck out, and one had mentioned holding a knife to me. I don't know the details of what they did, whether they killed a couple of people together, or if it was separately before they met, or even if they ever went to prison for it. It is highly unsettling to know that such people were in my house and that they were just so normal. In the late middle-aged drunken Finnish way, honestly they didn't act any different from plenty of other non-murdering Finns I know. So murdering couple, let's not meet again, despite your invitation to come round to visit any time. All I wanted was to use my coupon for free underwear from Victoria's Secret. The story starts out with a girl's day and afternoon, 24-year-old female with my good friend, Scarlett, back in December 2015. We both received coupons in the mail and it was finally time to use them, so we decided to get lunch and then head to the mall. Upon entering Victoria's Secret, I noticed a tall, heavy-set man pacing slowly in front of the doors. I figured this was probably just another guy, too embarrassed to shop with his girlfriend, sister, friend, mother, what have you, inside a store decorated with lace bras and half-naked models in underwear. After we each picked out a pair, we decided to just walk around the mall and go to the different shops, mostly window shopping. Scarlett wanted to find a pair of earrings that were Christmas festive, so we headed to Claire's. For anyone who hasn't seen a Claire's in the mall, they're usually tiny and the entire store can be viewed from the outside given how large the windows are. We were looking at one of the first rotating racks when I noticed a man standing slightly behind me. A quick glance over my shoulder revealed that it was the same gentleman who was pacing back and forth in front of the Victoria's Secret. He was not looking directly at me, so, again giving him the benefit of the doubt, figured that he likely followed his person to Claire's. However, I don't like tight spaces, so I casually move about a foot away from him. He shuffled closer. I scoot away again, and he again inched closer. Okay, weird. I look up. He towers over me, a good 6'2" if not taller, wearing a hoodie that hangs loosely, covering most of his thighs and baggy jeans. I give a short nod and smile. Big mistake. We lock eyes. In my head I can hear my friend saying, "Being nice causes accidents," and silently curse her. I move again and bend down to look at the other jewelry. He shuffles towards me again and this time nearly on top of me. He then puts his hands under his hoodie and starts making only what I can describe as a fapping noise with his hand. I'm not sure what he was doing. Maybe he had an itch, but the motion certainly did not look like he was scratching his stomach. The whole time he was doing this, he stared at the rack with a weird grin and would occasionally look at me. I freeze, slowly put the jewelry back on the shelf and straightened. Glancing at Scarlett, we make eye contact and nod to each other in mutual agreement, deciding to move across the store. He follows. At this point, I get closer to Scarlett. "Hey, is he freaking you out a bit?" "Yeah." "Okay, let's move back to the store, closer to the cameras and employees." So we move back and pretend to inspect the hairbands, pointing to which ones we like. The man proceeds to try to follow us back there, but the sales associate, thank God, steps in front of him. "Sir, do you know them?" No answer. "Are they your friends?" The man shakes his head. "Sir, I think you should leave the store." He immediately turns around and walks out. We thought it was over. Nope. We stay in the back for a bit, nearly forgetting about this strange man. I looked towards the front of the store and stopped in my tracks. The man was standing, staring me down with his nose nearly touching the window. I cannot forget the look he had on his face. It was as if he was watching his prey. I honestly have not seen that kind of menace in someone's eyes before, and it still gives me chills. I turn and face Scarlett. "Fuck, Scarlett, he's here. He's still here." She looks behind and her face goes pale. "Let's move," she says. Still staying along the back wall, we walk to the right-hand side of the store. He mimics our movements, never taking his eyes off me. "He's stalking you," Scarlett says. Thanks, needed that, I thought to myself. We look for the sales associate again, and she sees what he's doing. She looks over to me and tells us, "Don't leave the store. I'm calling security." I'm relieved and panicked at the same time. I texted my roommate to let him know of our location, what was happening, and to make sure he could get us in case anything escalated. Another 5 minutes went by, and the man walked off, looking back every now and then until he disappeared into the crowd. Then the security officer showed up. He looked frail, and he appeared to be an elderly man in his 70s. He asked us what was wrong, and we told him. The sales associate confirmed everything, down to what color clothes he was wearing and the sneakers he had on. The security officer shrugged. "Well, he's gone now. There's nothing I can really do. Let me know if he comes by again." I was shocked, a little hurt and frustrated. The employee helped keep a lookout for us as we scurried across the mall to the exit. We sped walked to my vehicle, got in, and locked the doors. Thank you, employee at Claire's, for being awesome and sticking with us, trying to make us feel safe. You went above and beyond your job. When I recounted the story to my boyfriend later that night, we ended up calling the security office at the mall to complain. We were told that it couldn't be helped. The head of the department tried to tell me that the man was mentally challenged and that at the time of our incident, he was unescorted by his family. After a couple of months of thinking about this, I'm not entirely sure of the case. Despite any disability he had, he was aware of what he was doing when you consider the sales associate asking him questions. This was in the middle of the afternoon in a crowded area in a well-lit place with a friend. I was not alone. Do not be lulled into a false sense of security as I was. Stay safe, my friends. So this happened at Christmas a couple of years ago when I was spending the holidays with my parents and little brother along with my cousins, aunts, and uncles. We live in a suburb in Ontario, but we were venturing out into the woods for Christmas, an idea that my parents had had for a while. They always loved the idea of being out in a hunting cabin during Christmas with their families. I'm a 22-year-old female now, but at the time, I just turned 18 and my little brother Tom was 11. We're really close and do everything together. We also had a dog, a German Shepherd called Trigger, who came along for the ride too. He's a real softie, but can be really overprotective, especially of my brother Tom. Anyway, we left from our house on Christmas Eve at around 2 p.m. and climbed into our dad's truck, filled with all of our stuff and presents for his extended family. Tom and I were really excited, winding each other up, and my parents were having friendly conversation as we moved along the road. We arrived at the village near the cabins we were staying in and caught up with my dad's sister, Billy, along with her husband and 3 kids. They didn't converse for long, but Billy was a bit unsure of where to go from the village to get to the cabins, so my dad helped her out by writing down the directions. We soon got back on our way and arrived at the cabins at around 4 p.m. There were a cluster of them sort of spaced out around the woods. Each family had a cabin to themselves, and there was one where everyone could meet up with a pool table, a swimming pool, and all sorts of activities. It was kind of a place we could all just chill together and enjoy each other's company. Anyway, the weather was already really cold when we arrived, and the snow was already falling around us, so me and my brother unpacked our things into the cabin and settled in for the night. My dad started a fire whilst my mom made our dinner. It was great. The Christmas decorations were already up and we played a few board games as the night got darker. Dad, Tom, and I decided before coming on the trip that we'd go hunting sometime, so we planned to go the next day. I've been a few times with my dad, but this was Tom's first time. He was only there to watch us though, as he was too young to shoot. It reached around 10 p.m. and my brother and I were getting a bit tired, so we decided to go to bed. My dad kept his rifles in a bag which he kept under the bed I was sleeping on. He'd usually keep it in a locked box, but thought there was no point since we were going hunting the next morning. Tom and I were sharing a room at the end of the cabin, facing a flowing river. The view was beautiful. Tom and I fell asleep with our dog, Trigger, laying at the bottom of Tom's bed. Now, this is when things began to get creepy. It was about 3 a.m. when I awoke to Trigger growling. I didn't find this particularly unusual because my dad suffers from insomnia, so sometimes when he can't sleep, he sits in our sitting room at home and watches some television. Like I said, Trigger is extremely overprotective and growls at any noise he hears, but that's when I noticed that there was no light coming from under my door. My dad never just sits in the dark. I whispered to Trigger, telling him to be quiet as Tom slept, but his growling soon turned to barking, which woke Tom up. He asked me what was going on, but I said Trigger must have heard some deer or something outside. After all, we were in the middle of the woods. Suddenly, our bedroom door swung open and the light switch was turned on. My eyes stung as I tried to focus on whoever it was at the door. It was my dad. "Were you two just laughing just now?" he asked as he turned to look at Tom, his eyes wide and his face pale. "No," I replied as he moved over towards our curtain, pulling it back as he looked into the pitch-black wilderness. "What are you looking at?" Tom asked as our dad closed the curtains again. "Nothing. Just go back to sleep." I was kind of creeped out that my dad didn't say anything about what he was doing, but he turned our light off and we tried to fall back asleep again. Of course, I couldn't. I was wide awake for the rest of the night, flinching at pretty much every noise. It was about 4:30 a.m. when I finally drifted off, but it must have been moments later I heard strange crunching noises coming from outside our window. I was sure this wasn't some sort of animal. It sounded like footsteps. I had this overwhelming feeling of fear and I pulled the covers over my face, sweat beginning to cover my forehead. I then heard a faint tapping on our window which lasted for a good few moments. I was so petrified I couldn't move. Trigger was awake by this point as I saw his face turn towards the window, his ears pointed and listening intently. The tapping started again, but louder this time, causing Trigger to bare his teeth. What happened next was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. "I know you're in there, little guy," this deep and husky voice whispered as a horrible shiver went down my spine. "Why don't you come out here and play with me?" Initially, I was filled with rage. I thought that it was bound to be one of my cousins playing a stupid prank on us, so I leaned forward and peeked through a gap in the curtain, ready to give them hell for scaring the shit out of us. But standing there wasn't any of our cousins. It was a creepy old man who was around 60, his hair matted and his clothes looked dirty and ancient. He was stroking the window with his hands, breathing on it as he spoke. I went into protective mode. I didn't know what else to do, so I grabbed my dad's hunting rifle from under my bed and pulled the curtain back. "Get the hell out of here, or I'll shoot!" I felt adrenaline rush through me as the creepy man's eyes widened and the most terrifying smile appeared across his face. Trigger began barking louder than I've ever heard him bark. My parents obviously heard the commotion and came running through to our room, turning the light on. My mom screamed as she saw the old man through the window, Trigger fiercely continuing to bark at the man. My father yelled at the man, telling him that the police were on their way, but the man legged it back into the woods. Tom was petrified, but I was angry more than anything else. How could some sicko do this? I was just extremely glad I had the rifle. The cops caught the guy just a few minutes later and arrested him. I found out a couple of days later that the creepy man was homeless and living in the woods, and he was suffering from a lot of mental issues. It scares me to death to think about what could have happened to my brother if I hadn't been there. We spent the remainder of Christmas Day at the cabin, but we stayed in our Aunt Billy's cabin overnight. There was no way we were sleeping on our own after what had happened. We went home first thing on Boxing Day and never looked back. My dad only told me the other day that he knew someone was hanging around our cabin, so he intentionally left the rifle under my bed in case I had to use it in self-defense. He did that because he didn't want to scare any of us. He called the cops after he heard the guy laughing outside of his bedroom window, singing nursery rhymes. My wife and I don't live together. She had become abusive over the last few months, mostly towards our daughter. Our daughter is almost 18 months old and is my whole world. I am unemployed at the moment, but my mother had been helping me out a lot. Today at around 4 p.m. I took my daughter to the store. I usually do this around the time she wakes up from her nap. My daughter is a very active child and can't seem to sit still for more than 10 minutes without getting cranky. I usually let her walk with me, holding her hand and patiently walking at her pace. I usually get just a juice for her, but had to get some extra groceries that I was short on: flour, sugar, and some noodles. I also remembered we were low on milk and grabbed a gallon on our way back. With all that I was carrying, I wasn't able to hold her hand. I made sure to walk behind her, but that only makes her walk slowly. As we made our way to the register, I was continuously urging her to keep walking, which she would do, but only for a second before her attention would be drawn to another rickety box with whatever was on sale, or she would see something colorful on a lower shelf. I was getting a bit frustrated, but I wasn't showing it in my voice. I kept urging her to keep walking, and she kept getting sidetracked. With everything I was carrying, I started to wish I had grabbed a basket. At the front, their customer service desk holds Register 1, which was thankfully open. I want to take the time to mention that my daughter is very fond of saying hi and waving at everyone. I set everything up to get rung up, but the service attendant was busy with a return at the customer service area, so I had to wait. The entrance to the store is to my right. The only exit is behind the service desk, which leads into the small foyer before leading to the other doors. As people enter, they have to pass the customer service desk. I was being fatherly to my daughter, trying to entertain her with patty cake and the itsy bitsy spider while we waited for the cashier to check us out. My daughter would frequently wave at people passing and say hi in her squeaky toddler voice. Some people would smile and wave back, while others would stop to adore her. At this point, I'm used to people doing that. It makes me happy knowing my daughter isn't a shy, cranky little asshole like some of the kids you see in the stores like this. The lady was ready to check us out, and I told my daughter to hold my hand since I wouldn't be looking her way. I had to pull my wallet out to retrieve my debit card to pay for the groceries and let her hand go for a moment. I kept looking her way to make sure she wasn't wandering off. The lady went to hand me my receipt when all of a sudden she yelled at someone behind me. "What are you doing with his daughter?" She bellowed as I turned to look at a man who had picked her up and started running towards the entrance doors. I was shocked. The doors didn't open since they were a one-way set of doors, and the cashier quickly picked up the phone yelling that she was calling the police. I was stunned to the point of immobilization, but quickly realized what was going on. I have a pocket knife that I usually carry on me so I can break the seal on my daughter's juice. I quickly ran after the man as someone started to make their way through the entrance doors. He didn't get a chance to run through before I slammed my fist across his temple. I decided not to use the knife in case I might get in trouble. The man stumbled and I grabbed my daughter from his arms. He then proceeded to run out the door, empty-handed. The police arrived about 5 minutes later and asked me what I had seen. I explained that I hadn't seen the man's face, since he had shaggy long hair and a beard. He was also wearing a hoodie, which wasn't that much of a surprise. They took the statement of several witnesses, including the cashiers, and had already had their other officers searching the area. Someone had said the guy had ran behind the building, but the officers didn't find anyone. The police took us home and then asked more questions like, "Have you seen him before? Do you know anyone who looks like this man?" and then proceeded to ask about the home life. The CPS had been over earlier in the day to discuss my wife's mental health issues, and the police had been here earlier as well. The officer asked if we needed any groceries or anything else, and I told them no. The officers left, leaving me their cards in case I saw the guy around the area. About 20 minutes later, I got a knock at the door. To my surprise, the officers had returned with the largest box of pampered diapers I had ever seen, a large box of wipes, about 6 large Winko bags of groceries, and a couple of bags of toys. I fell to my knees and cried after they left us. I had spent almost 5 minutes choking back tears as I thanked them. They had left us with a Christmas card saying I was a strong father to have had so much go on recently, and that my daughter was lucky to have such a great father. There was $100 in the card too, wrapped in a note that said to get a drink or two if I needed it. I don't drink, so I will probably get some extra Christmas presents for my mom and daughter. So, to the fucker that tried to kidnap my daughter, I hope the police find you, and I hope we never meet again. Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope you have an amazing holiday, and you've given me the greatest present of all. You shared, liked, commented, and brought this page up to 100,000 subscribers. I really can't tell you how much that means to me, so all I can say is thank you, and we'll see you again soon.